Would I be the a-hole to tell my little brother he's adopted without our parents' consent? I am 26 years old. I don't live with my parents, but I have a great relationship with them, as well as with my little brother Moses. Moses doesn't have a great relationship with our parents. He's never really had a great relationship with them. I don't fully understand why, but from what I can gather from my research, adopted children, even those who were too young to remember, can still have mental blocks and trauma, which prevents them from forming full relationships with their adoptive parents. Moses is 13 years old, and we're so close he spends most of his weekends at my house. His school breaks up for summer in a week, and he's already told me he wants to spend the first fortnight with me at my house, something our parents don't care about. When he's home, it's like constant fighting between them. I'm sure some of it is his teenage hormones, and possibly some of it is what I spoke about before. I was almost 15 when Moses came to live with us, and I remember our parents explaining to me why it was important to keep the adoption a secret. Didn't want him to feel different, didn't want him bullied, etc. At the time it seemed sensible. So I agreed to keep it a secret. I feel really regretful that I did. Moses talks to me about feeling different from the rest of the family, and I would reply with things like, "No, it's normal to feel that way when you're young," etc., which looking back I can recognize as almost gaslighting him. Something I feel truly guilty about. I never really questioned it, not until about 2 years ago. Then I started to unpack it in my mind, but if I am completely honest, I think I felt guilty, and so I repressed it. But it just kept coming back up. I did some research into adoption and the trauma it can give children, like I said, even those who can't even remember being adopted. I have no expertise in psychology and don't claim to be an expert, but this is just what I have gathered from my own research. On one hand, telling him could make his relationship with our parents even worse than it is. On the other, I feel like it can't be hidden from him forever, not successfully. I want to fool myself into thinking it could make their relationship better, but I don't see how it could. It would give him the satisfaction in knowing he isn't crazy for feeling different. The more I thought about it, the more I start to resent my parents for forcing me into this role of lying to Moses. I started to avoid contact with them to the point where they noticed. I spoke to them about how I felt, and they told me I can't tell Moses, and it will make everything worse for him. They've said if I tell him, they will go and see with me and make it incredibly difficult for me to have contact with Moses. Is telling him the right thing to do? Or am I just being selfish? I just feel like I'm lying all the time now. Top comments. One Redditor wrote, "I would say you will not be the a-hole, and your parents are huge a-holes for forcing you into this position where you must lie to your brother. Be aware though, telling him could have huge consequences on your relationship with him, his with your parents and yours with your parents." That's not me saying don't do it. But if you choose to be prepared, you are in an incredibly tough position, and I do not envy you in the slightest OP. Another Redditor responds, "So I was going to make a post from the perspective of an adopted person with all kinds of reasons why your parents are wrong, but you've already done the research and this person already said everything, edit. Most of, as it turns out, I really wanted to get across. Thanks for being interested enough to research and for wanting to do right by your brother. If he reacts badly, remind yourself that this is a child finding out he has been lied to his whole life. Emphasize that the whole reason you are telling him is because he really is your brother, and try to be there for him anyway. There's just as much of a chance that he'll see that already and appreciate you more for being the one person to tell him the truth. Basing a relationship on lies is never the right thing to do, and the person being lied to always has the right to the truth. Ripping the band-aid off and telling them is almost always the kinder option. Edit. And emphasize that his parents making a poor choice doesn't make them not his parents. Short version, more for people who haven't researched on their own, is that adopted kids are a lot more likely to deal with those feelings. This includes kids who don't know they are adopted. Genetic mirroring is real, and we recognize, the lack of it, even if only on a subconscious level. Knowing the truth doesn't cause it, but it does allow us to deal with it in a healthy way. That was longer than I thought, sorry. Edit again. But tell your parents what you are about to do and why. They deserve to not be blindsided by this, whatever else they've done, and he deserves to hear it from them if they're willing. Okay, I'm done. One Redditor suggested, before you make a move, ask them when, not if, they'll tell him. Because here's the thing from my perspective, as someone who has adopted myself. This sheet is important to know medically. If the doctor says any history of colon cancer in your family, you need to be able to give an accurate answer. Saying I don't know, I'm adopted will get you better medical care than an inaccurate answer would. On top of that, genetic testing continues to get more and more common, so it's very likely the truth will come out on its own anyway. They can either do it their way or have it done for them. I wouldn't make a move until explaining all that to the parents. Opie replies, they have no plans to ever tell him. Another Redditor asked, can you get them to agree to therapy for him? If so, although the therapist cannot give you confidential info, you can let them know and see if they have advice. The biggest issue is if you tell him now, your parents may cut you off from him, and then he has to process it all without any help or support. Opie replies, my parents don't believe in therapy or mental health. Another Redditor wrote, this may be adding fuel to the fire, and I don't want to open a can of worms, but given your parents' refusal to tell Moses about his adoption, is it possible that you may also have been adopted and are unaware? Another one wrote, aren't your parents worried that someone else will tell him? Surely other friends, neighbors, relatives know and could let it slip that he is adopted? What do other family members say about your parents not telling him? I am no expert on adoption, but all the people I know who have adopted kids were upfront about it. He's bound to find out someday, especially if he decides one day he wants to do a 23andMe kind of test, etc. How are they going to explain it to him then that they kept his adoption a secret? However, it's not your place to tell him, at least not right now while he is a minor. Your parents are the a-holes. Opie replies, as far as I'm aware, no one outside the family knows he's adopted. My grandparents obviously must know, but it has literally never been discussed by them to me at least. Redditor replies, how? Did she fake a pregnancy and not show anyone a photo until a couple years later? What about baby photos of him? Does he wonder why your parents don't have any? Or at least any that include them? It's messed up and they will cause all kinds of trust issues when he finds out. He will find out, and he will be mad at you as well. It's a catch-22 either way for you. Poor kid, a life of lies. Opie responds, it's not something they've told anyone about. My parents don't really have any close friends and aren't close with neighbors, so I don't think they would have noticed. But even if they did, they've moved houses several times since he was adopted. Genuinely don't think anyone would have noticed. Our parents don't really have baby photos of either of us, and the photos they do have they don't really get out to show us ever. My mom has kept my hair from my first haircut though, which I think is weird but not relevant. Redditor questions Opie. Opie, are you sure you're not also adopted? Update. For full context, you can read the other post on my profile, but essentially my parents adopted my brother Moses when he was 1. They've kept it secret from him. I was about 15 at the time, so I obviously knew. But I was young and dumb, and I just agreed to keep it secret also. They had no plans on telling him, ever. This wasn't a they're waiting for the right moment type thing. They just didn't want him to know. I feel deep regret that I waited for this long to even tell him. Before telling him, I got in contact with my friend, who is a social worker. I asked him if my brother decided to come live with me against my parents' wishes, what would social services do? He told me because Moses was at an awkward age of 13, it would be a toss-up on whether they would listen to my brother and allow him to stay, or whether they would force him to move back with our parents. I was advised that they have parental responsibility, so if they really pushed, he would be moved back. But if the social worker felt he was in any way unsafe, For example, Moses saying he would run away again if brought back home, they would be likely to leave him living with me temporarily. I decided to give my parents a final chance, tell him the truth or I will. They told me that in no uncertain terms will they ever tell him he's adopted. And if I do, they will go and see with me. I said I would rather they tell him. I don't want to be the one to tell him, but I believe he has a right to know. They outright refused. Moses normally walks home from school, so instead yesterday I went to pick him up. I told him we needed to talk. I said that Mom and Dad weren't going to like that I tell him this, but I believed he had a right to know. I explained the whole thing to him. How he was adopted when he was around 1.5. How I didn't know much about his background or where he was before he lived with us. I told him I was 15 at the time and how Mom and Dad told me it would be best for you not to know. How I stupidly believed them. I said if he was angry at me, I understood. I said I would take him home if he wanted. He was clearly in shock, but he asked to come to my house. He didn't speak at all on the drive home. When we got to my place, he just went into his room and just was quiet. I was worried. Wasn't sure if I had done the right thing. He came out maybe an hour later and just asked me so many questions. I tried my best to answer them, but I told him I didn't know a lot. I said I would support him in asking Mom and Dad. He said he didn't want to talk to them. He sent a text to them saying he was staying at my house for the weekend, something he does normally, so wasn't unusual. We put on a film and things were a little tense, but honestly, I expected more from him. He was so quiet. He went to bed early and I was so worried. I checked on him about every 90 minutes. This morning, he was a bit more back to his normal self. He said he was thankful that I told him. I asked him what he wanted to do. I would support him whatever he chose. If he wanted to confront Mom and Dad, I would support him. If he wanted to stay here, he could as long as he wanted. He said he just wanted to process everything. I asked if he had spoken to Mom or Dad, and he said beyond saying he was here, no. We played Fortnite together all day today, and he hasn't brought it up again. But he's acting like a weight has been lifting off his shoulders. I thought this would be sad news to him, but it seems like he's relieved. He's in bed asleep now. I'm worried about how our parents are going to react. But equally, I'm glad Moses knows the truth now. I'm glad that things seem to be working out okay. I hope they continue. Top comments. One Redditor wrote, "When you say a weight was lifted off his shoulders, maybe he knew. I think in all honesty you did the right thing by telling him because now he knows he can fully trust you and y'all will continue to have a great relationship. If he decides to talk with your parents, just be there for him. If he doesn't, still be there for him. He needs you right now in this time." Another one wrote, "I was given to a stranger as an infant. I was never legally adopted. I grew up knowing that I was someone else's child. However, I was told my mom was coming back for me. She never did. I always felt like I didn't belong and was never wanted by anyone. I am so proud of you for telling your brother. He deserves to know. It seems very suspicious to me that they never wanted him to know. I'd be concerned about kidnapping or illegal black market baby purchases. If I were you, I think you should both do a 23andMe or Ancestry DNA type of thing. The 23andMe really helped me with medical information, which has been beneficial in my healthcare. Good luck to both you and your brother. Please make sure he talks to someone. Keep reassuring him that he is your brother and that you love him." One Redditor wrote, "I am a teacher and have worked with many young people who have gotten to 13 to 15, and when I tell you they know. They know. From adoption, to a stepdad taking the role on and never being told about their bio-father, to being raised by grandparents/aunts/uncle and being told they are their parents. I feel I have seen every combination where the parents have decided to not tell the child the truth. They might not know the whole scope of what's going on, but they can feel it. This is a piece of his identity that he is going to need to help build the adult he is going to be. My warning is, He is going to test you in every way possible over the next few years to see if you really mean unconditional love. By 14 and a half, all teens go feral, but Moses has this trauma that he is going to need to work through and do some very unloving things to test this. So hold on tight. Do not buckle. Tell him you love him. You will not leave and you're here for the forever. But you can also be like, I love you, but you're being AD right now. Don't excuse every bad thing he does. Hold him accountable, but lovingly. They come good at around the 16, 17-year mark as they get that sense of self. Also, your parents are delusional. This is a part of Moses' identity. It was not okay for them to conceal it and try and pretend there was a different reality. I do wonder about their reasoning. Is there more to the story? I did have a family where when it came out it was that the baby was the product of an affair between dad and another woman. This kid was dragged up by his stepmom, who really was the long-suffering wife of this husband. The kid always felt othered. The parents instructed the family to never tell them they were adopted. Well, it turned out no one in the family knew that this child was a product of an affair. And it was the couple's way of concealing the shame of what had happened. They were very big in their church. The child did not arrive until they were 2. And this has some crossover with that situation. Just keep an open mind. But if this is that same situation, please let me know. That would be wild. This child was in trouble at school and ended up living with an auntie. I was there when we got the whole story. I will never forget Auntie's face. Thunderous is an understatement. Apparently, stepmom had been so hard of this baby from the get-go. Everyone used to step in. Auntie was mom's sister. She told me her sister was dead to her from that minute. Apparently begged her sister to be kinder to this kid. She said she couldn't believe her sister would be cruel to a child to cover for a man. The betrayal was so awful for the whole family. Another one wrote, "Coming from an adopted kid, I would be thankful. You don't have the right to keep the truth of my life from me. My parents didn't officially tell me till I was 12, but my brothers had told me since I could remember. My mom was the one who was worried if I found out, I would think they didn't love me as much because I wasn't their biological kid. I actually laughed when they told me BC they were so serious and nervous, and I was like, my brothers told me since I can remember. Plus you all are white and I'm Asian. My ex-BF didn't find out he was adopted till his parents died. He was cleaning out their house and found the adoption papers. Turns out his biological mom lived 30 minutes away and had died 5 months before from cancer. She'd had him super young and felt adoption was her best option. He was 45 when this happened and had to go through a lot of therapy to deal with the feelings of betrayal he felt about his parents feeling it was their right to keep this from him. One Redditor asked, "Were they treating him badly? Why did you want him to come stay with you?" I agree that they should have told him. But why were you so desperate to let him know even if it damaged your relationship with your parents? Update, I told my brother he's adopted, but I don't know if I did the right thing. I wanted to give an update on the situation since my last post. First off, thank you to everyone who reached out with advice and support. After I told Moses the truth, I was really worried about how he would process everything and what it would mean for our relationship and his relationship with our parents moving forward. Moses stayed with me the whole weekend and I tried to maintain a sense of normality. I could tell he was processing everything, but thankfully he still seemed relieved to know the truth. Yesterday night we had a long conversation. He told me again about how he had always felt different and out of place and never really understood why. He said knowing he's adopted gave him a sense of clarity. He says he is unsure how he feels about our parents, and I'm trying to support him without pushing him in any one direction. Moses asked me to tell our parents I had told him. Honestly, I didn't want them to know yet, but I'm following what he wants. Well, they predictably did not take the news well. The normal of them being furious and accusing me of betraying them and purposefully ruining their relationship because I was jealous. I wanted to say they were doing fine at ruining their relationship without me, but I bit my tongue. I told them it was the right thing to do, but they didn't listen. They kept saying that keeping the adoption a secret was the best way to protect Moses and that revealing the truth would only harm him and destabilize the family. I told them that Moses already had a sense that something was off and continuing the lie would do nothing but deepen his sense of alienation. During the argument, something one of the commenters said started to nag at me. I asked them directly if I was also adopted. It was like they froze. They didn't say anything for a good 30 seconds, and when they did, they just dismissed what I said, but I could feel something was different. I'm considering taking a DNA test to put my mind at ease, but I don't know if that's the right thing to do now when I should be focusing on Moses. Today, Moses tried to go home after school. Our parents locked the doors and wouldn't let him in. They ignored him knocking on the doors and have also ignored his text messages to them. He came back to my place, clearly upset and confused. Moses is such a good kid that I think he was willing to just move on, but now they've locked him out. He feels incredibly hurt and rejected, and I can't understand why they would do that to him. I can understand them doing it to me, but not to him. Well, this is the end of this crazy story. So what you guys think? Did Opie do the right thing telling the truth? If you guys have any thoughts or suggestions or an interesting story of your own, do share that in the comments section below. If you enjoyed the story, do like this video and subscribe to our channel. It is free and it helps us keep delivering you guys quality content. You guys can also support us by checking out the links in the video description and the channel's About section. You can watch these videos in the meantime. Hope you guys have a good day. Goodbye.